Hey y'all, it's Ashley at Bookishrealm and I am back with another video. As you all know, lately I have been doing some videos called Recent Reads, where essentially it's the weekly reading vlog where I'm like hyper focusing on reviewing the books as I read them. And so I've really enjoyed making those videos. It's been really fun to sit down and really put that stuff together, and it's been a really convenient way for me to review books as I'm reading them instead of waiting for like a mid-month and end of month wrap up where I try to review all the books that I've read, and it's over 2 hours of content for me to edit down because I like to give full length and extensive reviews. So with that being said, actually what I plan to do is that I still wanted to highlight the best and the worst books that I read each month and give you a little bit of the statistical information and kind of list all the books that I have read. So in this video, in this wrap up, I will not be reviewing every single book that I read. I will tell you all the books that I read. I will give you a little bit of stat information, and then I'm going to highlight my disappointments and my favorites from the month. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. If you're interested in any reviews of any of these books, I will make sure all of the recent reads that talk about these books are listed down below in the description box. I think there's only one book on here that's not going to be in a recent reads because of the way that this month worked. I'm going to end up doing 2 weeks worth of reviewing into the recent reads number 5 video, which will not go up until next week. So the first book that I ended up reading in the month of May was In the Key of Us. I then read Messy Roots, I'm a Wild Seed, Spy School, Shuri and T'Challa in the Heartlands, Winnie Zhang Unleashes a Legend. I don't know why I always have such a hard time saying that title. My Androgynous Boyfriend volume number 1, The Awakening, which is Zodiac Academy book number 1, Money Shot volume 2, My Boy in Blue volume 1, Blood Sugar, Halal Hot Dogs, Shinji Takahashi and the Mark of the Koala, Big Hard Sex Criminals volume number 1, If the Shoe Fits, No Family, The Magic Fish, Tokyo Ghoul volume number 1, Heartstopper volume number 1, The Romantic Agenda, Heartstopper volume number 2, The Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, Does My Body Offend You, Sister of the Bollywood Bride, Learn My Lesson, Harley Quinn Reckoning, Where We Go From Here, Luna, Adora and the Distance, A Worthy Opponent, The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, and Confession of an Alleged Good Girl. So like I said, all of those books are reviewed in the recent reads. The only one that you will not see a full-length review for is going to be Confession of an Alleged Good Girl, which will be in my recent reads number 5. So I ended up reading, now a little statistical information, I ended up reading 32 books in the month of May, which was a total of 8,614 pages, which is good. I'm still trying to make sure I'm on track to reach my 100,000 goal for the year. As you all know, when I talked a little bit about my goals, I was attempting to more so read 100,000 pages this year than to talk about like my physical reading goals, the amount of books that I was going to end up reading. In terms of 2 things that I've been keeping more track of, I haven't been keeping track of everything, but 2 things that I've been trying to keep track of are 2 forms of representation, 1 BIPOC representation and 1 queer representation. So for this past month, 40.6% of the books that I read had queer representation, which is almost half of the books I read, which is really, really good. I am striving to at least make that 40 to 50% mark every single month here on out. That's something that I have not been doing well. I usually hit somewhere in between like 10 to 15%, but I'm hoping that going forward I can continue to do in between 40 to 50% a month. And then 62.5% of the books that I read had BIPOC representation, which is well above the 50% mark that I'm looking at. 15 of the books that I read were audiobooks, 11 were physical, and 6 were digital, so about half and half between audio and then physical and digital, which is, I try to keep them pretty even. And in terms of like age categorization, I think we kind of hit all areas between adult, middle grade, children's, and, well, I don't think I read anything that would be considered children's. Most of it was just middle grade, YA, and adult, which is good. I think this upcoming month you'll see me read a little bit more children's materials. But let's go ahead and jump into this list. Let's start off with the disappointments. That way we can end on a positive note, because I don't want to end this video on like oh, this was such a disappointing book. So let's start with the positives. I mean, start with the disappointments so we can end with the positives. The first one that I have on this list is Luna. And Luna is I don't think it's serialized. I think it's just this one trade, and it's about 4 or 5 issues. And I had seen Luna when it was coming out in single issues. I just was not invested or interested in it enough to buy it as a single issue. So I was waiting for the trade to come out. It came out. I read it via Hoopla, and I'm not sure what I read. Like, if you look at the cover looks like you should be stoned when you're reading this book. I should have been high as hell when I read this book. And maybe it would have made a little bit more sense to me, but it was awful. Like, the creator tried to write in this lyrical style, and it just didn't make sense. The main character ends up getting stranded in like this desert area with a group of what appears to be like hippies who have decided to live off the land, but they have this weird vampiric ritual thing going on with a god who's stranded or tied up in a cave. It is the most weird thing. Nothing about it was cohesive. Nothing about it made sense. The artwork was nice in a lot of the panels, and I think that the color palette that was chosen was actually really, really nice. But overall, if we're talking like the grand scheme of things, this was an awful comic book. Like, it was awful, and that's why the rating of it is so low on Goodreads, because it just, none of it makes any type of sense. So I gave that one 2 stars. And what's so disappointing about all of these disappointments is that they're all graphic works. I just realized that every disappointment, so I have 4 disappointments this month, and all of my disappointments are graphic works. And that's, you know, some books were rated just as low as these, but I knew going in that they probably weren't going to be that good. Like, for instance, the first book in the Zodiac Academy series, was not expecting that to be great. So it wasn't a huge disappointment for me when I read it. These, however, I thought maybe had some potential, and they weren't. So the second one on the list is Money Shot Volume 2. I enjoyed Money Shot Volume 1. I think I gave it a 3 or 3.5 star. It literally is about these group of people who work in science, and they need to fund a project, and so they decide to basically do this whole thing where they go to different planets and they have sex with aliens, and they record it, and it's kind of like a pay-per-view type situation where people can pay to watch them have sex with beings that are not from Earth, which the concept is intriguing. I was like, you know, I had read Sex Criminals at that point, and I was like, this might be interesting, and I thought that it was pretty interesting. But I stepped into Volume 2. I got it on sale. It was $1.99 for the entire trade, and I was like, I'm gonna jump on this, because when is a trade ever $1.99? So I jumped in, got the trade, and holy shit, it was awful. It was so much writing, and I always like try to harp on the fact that when you're creating comics, like, it is easy to overwrite, which I think is very interesting. When you're like, oh, well, you read prose. I do read prose, but in a comic, like, I'm not looking for the same elements in a book that is prose. Like, I am looking for beautiful artwork, plot that makes sense, good character development, and not that much text. It was overly written. It was not interesting. Like, nothing of consequence happened. I was just like, what is this? It literally was so bad from transitioning from the first volume to the second volume that I was like, forget it. Like, I'm not even going to continue the series, because what's the purpose? If it's going to continue to be written like this, I don't want to pick it up. I don't care. I'm not invested. I'm not interested. So that was a huge disappointment for me, because I was looking forward to continuing the series, and I had talked so much about Volume 1, and, you know, what a waste. The next one that I have is Adora and the Distance. This one is one that I actually did not end up rating, and I sought some reviewers that could speak to what happens in this book better than I could. I know I had spoken about this in my last recent reads and talked about it explicitly in detail, where the story is pretty confusing. You meet this main character who is a part of this like fantasy kingdom, and she is being haunted by these dreams, and it's the distance that's after her, so she decides to leave the kingdom. That way it doesn't demolish the entire kingdom that she was a part of. So she partners up with these people and they go on this adventure together, and so you follow her as she's going through this adventure, not really knowing anything about what the distance is, so you're kind of confused a little bit. And then you see some time jump stuff that's a little weird about it, but then there's a huge reveal at the end, which, if this is going to spoil you, I will leave a timestamp up here of when I stop talking about it, so you can kind of skip ahead if you don't want to hear this. But I think it's important to understanding the context of this graphic novel and why it is considered to be so problematic, and what I would not have necessarily, being transparent, take into consideration, because I had to check out reviews from people, like their own lived experiences. So the main character actually ends up being autistic, and the writer of the book, his daughter was diagnosed with autism when she was about 2.5. So this is supposed to be kind of his experience as a parent of what he thinks is happening in his daughter's mind, because she was verbal and then she was nonverbal, I believe. Like maybe a couple years later she became nonverbal, and so there were times when she would like laugh or she would cry, and it wouldn't be prompted by any conversations that her parents were having with her or her siblings were having with her. So it was just one of those situations where he was trying to imagine what world she was living in the moment when she wasn't communicating with them. And so I read the reviews of people who do have autism, and they said that the way in which her autism was used as a plot device was completely inappropriate. How her parents talk about her as if she's not present in one of the panels was really devastating, and like it was a request that her mother had made about like, I want her to be able to say I love you, to know that she really means it or something, and people were like, that was really offensive. So the content was harmful, which was disappointing that that's what this ended up being, because I was really looking forward to it. But a lot of autistic reviewers said that it is harmful and that it paints a very ableist picture, or he's writing from a very ableist perspective, which a lot of people did not end up appreciating. So I respected and I listened to those reviews, and I left it unrated because it is not my lived experience. But that was such a huge disappointment to look forward to what I thought was going to be like this fantasy graphic novel with a black girl as a lead, and to not get that and to get something that was deemed harmful in the end was super disappointing. Okay, and the last one that I have on my disappointment list is My Boy in Blue Volume 1, which I randomly checked out from KU because it kept getting wrecked to me with like Kindle Unlimited like manga and comics and graphic novels that you could check out. So I checked it out because I was like, oh, okay, My Boy in Blue, it kind of reminded me of My Boyfriend in Orange, which is a kind of age gap firefighter type of situation. So I was like, okay, well maybe I'll get kind of like similar vibes, except this one is a police officer. And honestly, it just didn't hit the same. Like, I don't mind age gap. Technically, the romance was not illegal by the standards of the community. She was only 16. And so I was like, that's pushing it. You know, that's really pushing it. But I tried to be understanding of it. But then they went and they got married. And her parents were like, sure, go ahead and marry her. And I'm like, oh no, like this is not working for me. This is not working. I thought the main character was really annoying, and I was like, yeah, this is one of those situations where I feel like the age gap is just not in my favor, and I'm not liking it, and I think it's awkward as she gets married at 16, and so this just wasn't the one for me, and I quickly was like, I'm not going to be continuing this series. So yep, not one for me, y'all. Okay, so enough about the disappointments. Let's talk about the ones that I absolutely ended up loving and gushing about this month. And the first one on this list is one that I did not review just yet, and that's Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl. I love this book so much. 5 stars. I loved it so much. I had listened to it on audio from the library. I love it so much that I have a physical book sitting in my Amazon cart right now, and I'm probably about to buy it tonight because I need to reread it. It's been so long since I've read a book, and as soon as it's ended, I'm like, dang, I want to reread that book like right now. And I want to reread that book as soon as I get a copy of it. I am so happy. Like, Joya is just an amazing writer, and I loved her first book, which was Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry. I loved that first one. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, but this is even better, and I don't know how to explain like how good this book is. It literally focuses on a main character, and she is dealing with some issues related to her parents, namely the fact that her father is a preacher and they teach her purity culture, and there's a aspect of her sister not being in the picture anymore, and I won't spoil that for you, but essentially she has a boyfriend who has taken a purity pledge with her. Her parents love him, the whole nine, and then there's another guy who's in the picture who's supposed to be the bad boy, but clearly he's misunderstood, and it's not a love triangle or anything like that, thank goodness, because y'all know how I feel about love triangles. But essentially her boyfriend and her have tried to have sex like 28 or 29 times by the time we get into the beginning of this book, and for some reason, like, she can't physically, like, she cannot have sex. And so we discover like what is the reasoning behind why she can't have sex, and I don't even want to spoil that aspect of it, but she learned so much about herself, so much about her body. Readers learn so much about purity culture and how harmful it is, and the family dynamics, the friendship, just her just being a young black girl trying to understand her body as a young woman, and that information being kept from her and as a means to protect her, and it's just done so much harm to her. And just, this book is so sex positive. It doesn't shy away from using the correct anatomical names for body parts. Like, this is the book that I needed when I was a kid. I didn't have to deal with purity culture or anything like that, like, thank goodness I didn't, but oh my gosh, still the openness of like talking about sex, about your body and expectations, and being okay with saying like, I'm not ready to have sex. Like, I needed this stuff as a kid, and I don't feel like I got what I needed to get, and I'm so happy that this book exists for like teens now, because holy shit, like, phenomenal book. This is an impactful book. This is a book that just, it has blown my mind. 5 stars. Easily one of my favorite books of 2020, maybe one of my favorite books of all time. Like, this book made such an impact on me as a 30-year-old woman. And so with that being said, and it wasn't written for me, like, this book is definitely written with a teen audience in mind, but holy shit, did I mean, oh my gosh, it was so good, y'all. So good. If you have not read Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl, I need you to read it. Check it out. It's so good. The next one that I have on this list is one that I also just really enjoyed, and that's The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, which this was, oh man, this was another good one. It's 4.5-star read for me. It focuses on a main character who ends up having to go to Catholic school with her brother. She is a lesbian, and she's not out to her family. She's very nervous about coming out to her family, and knowing that she comes from a conservative background where they are Catholic, and she's so nervous about coming out that she basically is saving up money so that when her mom kicks her out, she'll have somewhere where she can stay. And we are following her as she goes to this Catholic school, not expecting to make friends because she is Latinx and she is having to navigate this school that of course is predominantly white. And so she does experience a little bit of racism, but she is, you know, able to find comfort and some people that she ends up meeting. There are great side characters in this. I love this sibling dynamic between her and her brother. Oh goodness gracious, it was just so good. She has a lot that she's healing from, that she's processing. You know, she ends up having to deal with the fact that her best friend essentially outed her, and it was not a good situation for her at all, but it was great. Those two right there, I mean, I have 3 more that I really enjoyed, but those two I think shocked me in ways that I did not expect. Like, I hadn't seen a lot of people. I'd seen a couple of people that I trust, like had read Confessions of a Legit Good Girl, and Joya had already written a book that I enjoyed, but I think I was not expecting it to impact me the way that it did. And then The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, I hadn't seen a lot of people that I knew that had read that one. So going into these books and not having that expectation necessarily of being mind blown, they were such pleasant surprises for the month of May. The third one that I have that was I absolutely loved was The Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. And so many people that I know have absolutely loved this book, and I'm not a big like fantasy romance or like monster romance reader, but I was like, I really want to try it because I've heard so many great things about how cute it was, and I'm like, all right, just read it. It was so good. It was the cutest romance ever, and I know that sounds so wild to say that, but it literally was the cutest romance between Sin and Phelan, and he is a demon and he's very protective of her, and they have this great chemistry, and you feel the vibes the entire book. And when they finally get to the point, you're like, yes, thank goodness. But like, the side characters were great, the whole plot was great. Like, it was just an interesting story. I laughed out loud quite a bit reading it. Like, you could tell that Sin is a black character. Like, the voice of her as a character, it just really shined. Like, it's clear as day this is a black woman, and I just felt that energy, and I absolutely love this book. I have the rest of the series on my Kindle. I haven't gotten a chance to read them yet, but I will be reading them soon. The next one that I have on this list was also a pleasant surprise, and that is If the Shoe Fits. This is the first book in the Meant to Be series, and I read this one because I had gotten a finished copy of the second book in the Meant to Be series, which is by Jasmine Guillory, and so I was like, okay, well, let me just read the first book. I'm sure like they're not explicitly connected or anything like that, but for the sake of being a completist, why not go ahead and check it out? It was so good. This is what I wanted one to watch to be. I wanted one to watch to be If the Shoe Fits, and it was not. It did not give me these vibes. The fat rep, oh my gosh, it was so good. It was so good. And tying into this reality show that's like The Bachelor, I was like, this is what I needed. This was the fat representation that One to Watch should have been and didn't do a good job of doing. And it didn't try to be anything more than what it was, and I appreciated that, because One to Watch for me was like trying to be this ultra diverse romance and have fat rep and all types of racial and ethnic representation, and it was a hot mess. This was just done so beautifully, and it is a Cinderella retelling, but done in a way that's just different, where we have Cindy who's going back home. Her stepmom is, you know, her family. You know, she doesn't have her mom, she doesn't have her dad. Her stepmom and her siblings are her close family. She gets on this reality TV show. She's a fashion designer, and like the way that the whole elements of the reality show played out, I was invested in it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I appreciated it. And it was something that I was like, oh yeah, like it was like watching a good reality TV show with great character development, great plot line. Like everything about this book was done so well. And I'm just like, I was not expecting to be as like into the story as I was. It was just well done, y'all. Oh my gosh, that was a well done book. If you're looking for fat representation, plus size representation, that is the book to pick up. If you like reality, you know, reality TV inspired romance, like it was the complete package. And the last one on my list should not be a surprise to anyone. It is Heartstopper. I mean, granted, I reread it. The first volume, anyway, was a reread for me. The second volume was a new read. I mean, what can I say that hasn't already been said about Heartstopper? It is the most charming series ever. It literally is nothing but just happiness and compassion and understanding, and I really, there's nothing that I can add. Like, there's nothing else that I can say that hasn't already been said. I cannot wait to get into volume number 3 and volume number 4. Don't know when I'm going to do it, but hopefully soon. But so good, so good. All right, y'all, so those are my, you know, biggest disappointments and also my favorites of May. Let me know in the comment box below whether you're enjoying this format. I'm probably like 9 times out of 10, y'all, like I'm not gonna shift back to I am not gonna shift back to doing the 2 hour, having to edit 2 hours of stuff. I just don't have the capacity to do it. But like the recent reads and then doing kind of like a final wrap up of like my favorites and disappointments is something that's more manageable for me. So I hope you all are enjoying the format. Let me know in the comment box below what were some of your favorites and some of your disappointments for reading this past month in May. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button. Looking for ways to support my channel, my Patreon and my Amazon wishlist are down in the links below. As always, I'll be back with another video soon.